On Monday, we as the United Kingdom gather to mourn, pay tribute and give thanks to Queen Elizabeth II. Here at GB News, we invite you to gather with Anne Diamond, historian David Starkey, and myself, Alastair Stewart, live from Buckingham Palace, Westminster Abbey and Windsor Castle, all day Monday.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking largely dry and cloudy for most, with some sunny spells across parts of the south. Here are the details. Skies will be cloudy across much of Scotland tonight, but temperatures could fall as low as 1 Celsius in Aberdeenshire and Moray, where the cloud breaks, giving a chilly start to the day. Cloudy skies across Northern Ireland could bring a few showers on Monday morning, but many places will stay dry and fairly mild under the blanket of cloud. A few showers may also push into Cumbria and the northwest coast on Monday morning, but largely dry across the rest of northern England with cloudy skies. A cloudy start in Wales on Monday morning, perhaps with the odd spot of rain on the north coast. However, many places will start the day dry and cloudy. Skies will be on the cloudy side across the Midlands, but it should be a dry start to the day. There's a small chance of a shower in the morning where the cloud thickens. Brighter skies will develop across East Anglia on Monday morning, and it will be a chilly start too, with temperatures in mid-single figures. Cloud will increase at times, but it should stay dry. Breaks in the cloud are likely across southern England, particularly towards the coast. However, for most it will be a largely cloudy start, but staying dry. Cloud will linger through much of Monday morning, but the best of any brighter spells will start to develop towards noon, particularly in southern England and northeast Scotland. And that's how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel. I'm Dan Wootton, here live at Buckingham Palace after the people of Britain, led by Prime Minister Liz Truss, took to their doorsteps to bid goodnight to Her Majesty one final time with a national minute's silence. This is a special Sunday night edition of the show as we prepare for tomorrow's state funeral of Queen Elizabeth the Great. And while I've been heartened to see the country unite to remember the Queen in so many beautiful ways, the likes of the New York Times, CNN, and even LBC's toxic James O'Brien are sadly determined to pit us against each other. Even
somebody somewhere has very deliberately conceived a plan to have hundreds of thousands of people snaking through London.
But him aside, I keep thinking about what the last 10 days means for a previously divided Britain. The unified spirit in which we've come together to say goodbye to our greatest ever monarch has been awe-inspiring, and I'll explore what it means in a special digest next. Then I'll get the thoughts of tonight's superstar panel, writer and media personality Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the journalist and royal commentator Angela Levin. Plus at 9:50, a State Affair author Laura Dodsworth explains why she has been moved by the Queen's passing and reveals what this long goodbye has shown about the way Brits deal with grief. Around 500 head of states and dignitaries, including US President Joe Biden, were welcomed at Buckingham Palace by King Charles tonight ahead of the Queen's funeral. Not in attendance, however, Prince Harry and Meghan. So was it wrong to uninvite the Sussexes from tonight's state reception, or is this a snub of their own making? Well, Daily Mail columnist Andrew Pearce is going to weigh in on that at 9:35. As the disgraced Duke of York praises the role of his mummy, is King Charles right to attempt to stop Andrew and fellow non-working royals, Harry and Beatrice, from deputising for him, as has been revealed today? We're going to debate that at 10. Should William and Kate allow 9-year-old Prince George, who's second in line on the throne after all, to attend the state funeral of his great-grandmother tomorrow? That's been suggested by royal advisers. Well, our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, will weigh in at 9:20. Why is the liberal US media now calling for race reparations from the royal family as they step up their ghoulish anti-monarchy campaign? Well, former Margaret Thatcher aide Niall Gardner is going to speak out on this at 10:20. And as ITV begins one heck of a damage control operation, were this morning duo Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby wrong to jump ahead of mourners queuing up miles to see the Queen's lying in state? I have to tell you, one of my superstar panellists is absolutely riled about this. I'm going to explain why at 10:30. This is GB News live at Buckingham Palace on the eve of Her late Majesty the Queen's historic state funeral. Breaking tonight, Prince Andrew has paid tribute to his mummy in an emotional message. In the note released online with a picture of the late Queen holding the disgraced Duke of York as a baby, he wrote, "Mummy, your love for a son, your compassion, your care, your confidence I will treasure forever. I have found your knowledge and wisdom infinite with no boundary or containment. I will miss your insights, advice and humour. As our book of experiences closes, another opens, and I will forever hold you close to my heart with deepest love and gratitude, and I will tread gladly into the next with you as my guide." Now, Andrew ended his tribute by writing "God Save the King" in honour of his brother's accession to the throne. But is there any way back for him, considering King Charles reportedly wants to change the rules to shut out non-working royals? Well, joining me live now here at Buckingham Palace, and she's with me all night, the US-based royal commentator Kinsey Schofield. Kinsey, it's great to have you here for what is going to be, of course, a very emotional and historic 24 hours. But let's kick off with this breaking news tonight. Prince Andrew's statement. I've seen a lot of commentary, Kinsey, saying this just isn't reading the room. It isn't appropriate for someone in his position to pay tribute to his mother in that way. Is that fair?
I'm seeing the same commentary. And I would say you can look at this two ways. You can subtract the fact that it's Prince Andrew and just digest it as a man grieving his mother, which is what I'm trying to do, because I felt like it was a bit inappropriate as well. And I keep saying guilt by association. I want to believe he's innocent of what he's been accused of doing, because he says he is, but he is associated with Jeffrey Epstein, and I feel like people have a hard time getting around that. And then, you know, I sit on it for a few days, Dan, and I realize I'm coming from the United States where we still worship the Clintons. So yes, I think that there is room for forgiveness, and I think that inevitably people will truly forgive this man and move on. I think that that is really an option.
His mother always did believe him, Kinsey, but now that she is no longer with us, he's lost his greatest ally in the royal family, hasn't he?
Absolutely. And we have heard for years that Prince Charles was, or King Charles now, trying to distance himself from Prince Andrew and wanting to keep the monarchy tighter, smaller, so that there's less scandal and so people don't feel like they're as expensive as they seem to be. And I don't see there being a path forward for Prince Andrew within the King Charles reign. However, I do think inevitably we will be kinder to him and friendlier towards him and less offended by his presence.
He remains a constant thorn in the side, though, doesn't he, of King Charles's attempt to cleanse the monarchy of the scandal that has surrounded it over the past couple of years, Kinsey. What does he have to do? I mean, does he have to effectively make his brother an official outcast? It looks like he is going to change the rules, so he won't be able to be one of his councillors of state.
I mean, this is a very tough situation that King Charles is in, because Ghislaine Maxwell could speak at any time. We know that Prince Andrew's accuser has said she definitely is going to write a book. That is concerning for the future of the monarchy. And I do think that King Charles's best path forward is to limit Prince Andrew's access to, the spotlight and to push him away. It's horrible. I'm sorry to say that, but we're at a fragile point with the monarchy. I don't know if you'd agree, but the Queen currently lying in state, and people already whispering about Commonwealth's whispering about not wanting King Charles. I think that's it's very inappropriate at this point in time. So I do feel like we're at a fragile state, and so King Charles has got to be aggressive.
Look, I actually completely agree with you, Kinsey. Just to put the other side of the argument, though, of course, people close to Prince Andrew say actually he did the Queen a huge favour in her final year by not fighting the court case against Virginia Giuffre. It meant all of the focus could be on her Diamond Jubilee, her Platinum Jubilee, sorry. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it is a counter-argument. The problem I think that King Charles has, Kinsey, is he can strip Prince Andrew of every formal role, but he cannot force a man to disappear from public view altogether. And in fact, a Prince Andrew who is stripped of all of his official roles could actually end up being potentially more of a risk for King Charles if he doesn't go quietly. But obviously, Kinsey, that's something we're going to be following over the next couple of years. But over the next couple of hours, you will be with me here live at Buckingham Palace. Thank you so much, our US royal commentator, Kinsey Schofield. And of course, we are here until 11 p.m. with all of the latest coverage as King and country continue to mourn the late, great Elizabeth II. But to round up another historic day in the news, it's Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Dan. The latest from the GB newsroom. People across the UK have observed a minute's silence as part of a national moment of reflection for the Queen ahead of her funeral tomorrow. A warning the following contains flashing images. Mourners all over the country fell silent and bowed their heads, followed by a round of applause. Prime Minister Liz Truss and her husband were among those taking part and stood outside number 10 at Downing Street. There will also be a 2-minute silence at the end of the state funeral service tomorrow at 11:55 a.m. The Queen Consort Camilla paid her own tribute to the late Queen, addressed to the nation in a TV broadcast. She spoke of her great influence on the nation.
She has been part of our lives forever. I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there. It must have been so difficult for her being a solitary woman. There weren't women prime ministers or women presidents. She was the only one, so I think she carved her own role.
King Charles has hosted a reception for world leaders at Buckingham Palace ahead of the Queen's funeral tomorrow. US President Joe Biden was among those in attendance after paying his respects to the Queen at Westminster Hall. He says the world is a better place because of Her Majesty as he signed a book of condolence. Around 500 world leaders and dignitaries have been invited to attend the Queen's state funeral tomorrow. Presidents, prime ministers and royals from across the globe came together as guests of the monarch. Mourners looking to join the queue to see the Queen's coffin are now being asked to head to London Bridge. Thousands of people are still waiting to file past Her Majesty's coffin, with the waiting time now around 7 hours. Westminster Hall will close to the public at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Mourners are gathering in key locations along the route of Her Majesty's funeral procession. Many have brought their own tents as they prepare to camp out overnight to secure the best spot. Popular places to pitch up include Parliament Square near Westminster Hall. Authorities are asking those hoping to attend to plan well in advance, with huge crowds expected. Thousands of people are expected to watch the funeral on big screens across the UK. It'll be shown at public parks and venues in a number of cities. Around 125 cinemas and several cathedrals will also screen the service. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton.
As the country and world prepares to say our final goodbye to Queen Elizabeth the Great, with her state funeral likely to become one of the most viewed events ever tomorrow morning, it's been another unprecedented weekend in modern British history. The Queen's children and grandchildren put family feuds to one side for two breathtaking vigils around Her late Majesty. Meanwhile, King Charles and Prince William have done all they can to assure us that the post-Elizabethan era of the monarchy will be one where the royals are regularly up close and personal with their subjects. But overshadowing all of that, the Elizabeth line itself. The queue to end all queues, snaking around many of the great sights of London as a special equalising force, bringing us together in quite remarkable ways. So here's to another unforgettable few days. I keep thinking about what really the last 10 days means for a previously divided Britain. The unified spirit in which we've come together to say goodbye to our greatest ever monarch has been awe-inspiring. Political divides have been largely absent from this period of mourning, and I think we should be highly suspicious of those individuals and groups who want to use this time to sow division. Like James O'Brien, the toxic LBC hard-left presenter, who has claimed the queue is some sort of establishment plot to concoct mass grief for the late Queen. Look.
Somebody somewhere has very deliberately conceived a plan to have hundreds of thousands of people snaking through London, visibly, publicly, and performatively queuing to pay their respects to the late Queen. Why have they done it like this? How, I don't want to say sinister, so I won't. The more I think about the very deliberateness of this, the more manipulated I feel.
Or the BBC and Sly News, who think it's appropriate to use the Queen's death to push the cause of Scottish independence and indeed, in the case of the latter, a revolution.
King returned today to a Scotland that has been diverging from the rest of the UK politically for 40 years. Support for independence is still below 50%, but not by much, and it's much higher amongst the young.
The King has chosen to begin his reign with visits to Edinburgh, Belfast and Cardiff is telling. It suggests that the future of the Union is at the heart of his concerns. The early decades of his late mother's reign were characterised by the long, slow contraction of British imperial power around the world. He will be alert to the possibility that his own reign could come to be defined by the continuation of that process here and the eventual dissolution of the United Kingdom itself.
It's without doubt that the Queen was part of the glue that held the nations of the United Kingdom together. But undoubtedly people who will be unsettled by the passing of the Queen will be wondering what kind of political impact it's going to have as we ask ourselves questions about what kind of United Kingdom we are now and whether in fact we should remain united.
As Lord Bottomley, we were talking to him, was referring to this and saying how, some people will say, well, how come we've got a royal family? It's not very democratic. The fact of the matter is, it is democratic, you know, until we have a revolution. It's democratic in the sense that the British public is laissez-faire about changing it.
But while they've tried, supported by their grief-shaming, Britain-hating left-wing trolls that dominate that cesspit that is Twitter, the British public has been unified in our desire to celebrate the life of the late Queen Elizabeth II. In fact, a new poll released today shows support for Scottish independence has already plummeted by 7 points since the death of the late Queen. We feel no shame about her magical reign, no matter how hard the New York Times and CNN might try, because we know she has been a positive force for good in this country, the Commonwealth, and the world. And tomorrow, the nation will stop to bid her a respectful final goodbye. It's the least we can do. To respond now, I'm joined by my superstar panel, the broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the Royal commentator and biographer, Angela Levin. Christine Hamilton, we have been united this week, haven't we? It doesn't matter what James O'Brien tries to say about the queue being some sort of establishment plot or how hard the BBC tries to push the cause of Scottish independence. We are united in our grief.
We are, and I mean, James O'Brien, bore on. He is, change the record, please. He's bitter and small-minded, and he simply cannot understand why hundreds of thousands of normal, ordinary Brits of all shapes and sizes, colours, hues, etc., would want to queue for hours and pay their respects and say their thank you and gratitude for the Queen. To me, that shows a contempt for ordinary people, and it's exactly the same contempt that he showed when the Brexit debate was going on, because he simply couldn't understand why so many people voted Brexit. It was not what he wanted, but he simply couldn't understand why others did. He cannot, by his small-minded little comments, he cannot undermine the tremendous gratitude and grief which everybody has showed by lining up. And in a way, you know, there haven't been that many James O'Borons commenting. There really haven't. And his stands out in a way. There have not been that many.
I mean, Calvin Robinson, the Elizabeth line, the great Elizabeth line, it is a thing of beauty, isn't it? How on earth could you find a way to criticise the government for it?
Because some people don't like beauty. I think that's what's been exposed throughout all of this. There are some hateful elements of the hard left. James O'Brien is one example of them, hateful little man, that do not like beauty, do not like unity. And that's what's happened over the last week. We've seen people unifying, people who have been divided and polarised coming together to mourn our Queen together, to celebrate her life together. That's a beautiful thing we should all celebrate. But some people can't get behind that. That's a great shame. And the BBC have shown poor taste, bad timing, in words like revolution and obsessing over Scottish independence. Again, an element of the left that cannot get behind us as a British people. They need to read the room. Look at the queue. Look at the size of the queue. The British people are coming together. That's a good thing.
And Angela Levin, look, politics will return in full force on Tuesday, as it should. But over the course of the past week, actually, I feel the British public have been more than happy to say, actually, for once, we are going to put it to one side and come together because it matters.
I think it's a marvellous example of the United Kingdom is now united. And I think at last we can feel we are one body. And I think it's curious, really, that the Queen was up in Scotland when she did pass away, because it seems in a strange way as if she wanted to help us deal with Scotland. And the Scottish people reacted in the most extraordinary positive way. Streets were crowded with people, they were cheering. And then they went to Holyrood House, where she stayed overnight in her coffin, and people were there desperate to see it, just as much as the people were in London, and came from far and wide to see that. And they were very warm. They weren't thinking, oh, well, you know, thank goodness we now can sort of start having yet another referendum. Not at all. There was no sign of that. It was a sign of we are one with people in the United Kingdom, lower down the map, and we want to be together because it's so important. And she was such an extraordinary woman. And I think it softened people all over the place. And the whole thing about the walking is that people have made friends, people have felt companions. I mean, so many of us have been stuck at home for so long that you're not used to socialising, you're not used to making friendly conversation. It's quite hard to get from one to the other, whatever age you are. And this has really changed us. And it's as if the effect of her, even though she's no longer with us, is still there, because this is exactly what she would have liked, I'm sure.
All brilliant points. And do you know what? I don't believe, we may never find out, but Angela, I do not believe it was some coincidence that the Queen died in Scotland. I just don't. I think she knew, and I think it's been a very positive thing for the Union. But maybe we will never know what was going through her head.
It makes her an even more extraordinary woman. I mean, we've had 3 rainbows now, and a couple of clouds with her face on, with a crown on, and now, you know, this with Scotland. I mean, it's beyond imagination, really.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it is. It is. I mean, what we've lived through these past 10 days, we're living history. We will never forget it. And I have been so honoured to spend much of it with the 3 of you, and you will be here for the rest of the night. So thank you so much to the broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the Royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin. And of course, we are continuing our coverage of the remarkable life of Her late Majesty the Queen. Now, the Prince and Princess of Wales have reportedly been asked to consider letting Prince George attend Her late Majesty's funeral tomorrow at just 9 years old. According to the Mail on Sunday newspaper, senior palace advisers want George, who is second in line to the throne, to join other members of the royal family in laying to rest his beloved Gangan, believing it would send a powerful symbolic message about the enduring strength of the monarchy. It's a decision that you have to imagine will weigh heavily on William. I mean, last week he admitted escorting our late Queen from Buckingham Palace to the Lion and State at Westminster Hall brought back traumatic memories from 25 years ago when, at aged 15, he, along with a 12-year-old Prince Harry, had their grief thrust into the public eye when they walked behind their late mother, Princess Diana's coffin at her funeral. So what do you think? Should Prince George attend the funeral of his great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II? Send me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. You can vote in our poll while you're there. I'll bring you the results on that very shortly. But to help you make up your mind, I'm joined by our esteemed royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, to give their take. Now, Lady C, look, of course, this is a decision for the parents to make. But I am minded, Lady C, to believe it is important for our monarchy, for Prince George, if he's up to it, to be there tomorrow. Am I wrong?
I think you're absolutely right. I think it shows continuity. It also shows preparation for the throne that rarely needs to start when you're very young. One of the problems with young people nowadays is that they're not brought up from they're very young to be equipped to deal with life as it's going to be, and it causes a lot of problems for them as well as the world. I think it is the ideal thing to do. I went to my first funeral when I was 9 years old. 9 years old is regarded as perfectly old enough. And Prince George is from a very sound, solid family background. He knows what his role in life is going to be, and it is ideal preparation. And I think it would be a big mistake to miss this opportunity, because not only will it be good for us, the people, but it will be good for him, because it is a fundamental building block in the edifice of his future monarchy.
Phil Dampier, what do you think? Should Prince George be there?
I've been making a few inquiries on this today, and I'm told that he is going to go. That's what I'm being told, that the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided it would be a good idea. And I tend to agree with Lady C. I think it is. People obviously know from their own families. It's always a very difficult one to know whether to take a child to a funeral. I don't think there's any comparison with William and Harry walking behind Diana's coffin. I mean, that was walking for quite a long distance in full view of the world. Obviously, George is going to be in the congregation with his parents, a much more relaxed situation. And as Lady C says, it's all part of this sort of process of him preparing to be king eventually. I mean, we saw him and his siblings, Charlotte and Louis, during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. And it's all part of that, slowly introducing him to the reality. I don't know what age he's going to realise his future role. Prince Charles said that when he discovered it, or realised when it dawned on him his destiny, he was absolutely horrified. It came as a terrible shock. And at some point, it's going to hit George. He's second in line to the throne, as you say. And when you think about it, if he lives to a ripe old age, he will be the first king, the first monarch of the 22nd century. So it's quite incredible to look ahead. I mean, we've had three amazing female monarchs in history: Elizabeth I, Victoria, and of course now Elizabeth II herself. And looking ahead now, we've got three males. That's just the way the cookies crumble, but we've got three men coming up.
Wow, it is incredible to think of that, isn't it? 22nd century monarch. Lady C, I actually think if Prince George doesn't go tomorrow, although great to hear from Phil Dampier there, he believes the decision has been made to take him. You could imagine it actually being something that he deeply regrets later in life, because he's going to want to be able to say, I was there at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth the Great, my great-grandmother, and what a woman she was. That is going to be quite a story to come in the decades to come.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dan. I think putting any of us with a bit of imagination, putting ourselves in his shoes, when he's grown up, if he goes, he will not regret having gone. Also, Prince George, I am reliably informed, understands that his grandmother is dead. He understands the concept of life. He understands the concept of death. He's old enough to understand. And I think it would be a grave mistake if he were not allowed to go. But I agree with Phil. My understanding is that he is going to go. And let's hope that let's put it this way, let's hope that our understandings are correct. Because I think if he goes, it will be a lifelong benchmark for him. And if he doesn't go, it will be a lifelong regret. Because it will be a golden opportunity, really very badly missed.
And Phil, we have to be honest about this. This week has been probably the biggest stage King Charles is ever going to have to convince the world, and maybe to convince some of those wavering Commonwealth countries, that the future of the monarchy is secure. I feel he's done a very good job of that, Phil, and he's done it through some serious grief, of course, as well. But to be able to see tomorrow King Charles, Prince William, Prince George, it would be a really powerful message, wouldn't it? That this monarchy is strong and it is not going anywhere, Phil.
No, that's right. It's sending out a message of continuity, isn't it? And it's securing the Queen's legacy, both for here and also for the Commonwealth. And it's fascinating to me that Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand Prime Minister, and the Australian Prime Minister, they seem to have put off the decision. They're both Republicans, and they say it'll happen in their lifetime, but they don't want to be the ones to do it. So I think there's been a surge in popularity, not only here, but also in other Commonwealth countries. So it's going to be very interesting. Just going back to George, one group of people that haven't been mentioned very much in this last week are the Middletons. Kate's family. We haven't really seen any of them. And Kate's mother, Carol, is incredibly close to George. She sees a lot more of him than Prince Charles does. And I'm sure that she's been working behind the scenes, giving him courage and helping him through this very difficult week, the loss of his Gangan. And we don't see much of her, but she should be credited with looking after him a great deal, which she does in private.
No, very good point. Thank you so much to my esteemed royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, for your invaluable insight. And of course, they will be back with me here again tomorrow night as we have another special show reflecting on the late Queen's state funeral. So what do you think? Should 9-year-old Prince George attend the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, as royal advisors have suggested, to show the strength of the monarchy? From Justine on Twitter, grief is a totally individual thing. Only Prince George and his parents know what's right for George. He is still a young child. From Boralis, yes, George should go, but not to show the strength of the monarchy, but to say goodbye to his great-grandmother. And from Andy, I am 35. I was 7 when my gran passed. Looking back, I wish I had been there for a glorious lady on her final journey. And your verdict is now, and this is very interesting actually, a split opinion. 61% of you think Prince George should attend the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. 39% of you say he should stay home. Very fascinating, because both Phil Dampier and Lady Colin Campbell saying they believe he will be there. But we will know by this time tomorrow. Now, the Queen's state funeral tomorrow has been described as the biggest UK police operation ever conducted, with royals, world leaders and up to 1 million people set to visit London to pay their respects. More than 10,000 police officers will be drafted in from around the country, with 2,300 personnel lining the route. Military staff will be put on standby in and around Westminster Abbey, where the funeral is taking place, and it's reported that all manhole covers will be lifted to check for explosives, and every lamppost will be opened and searched too. So this is a testament to the operation, I think, especially given there's only been one major breach so far. That was during Saturday, where a 28-year-old man from East London was charged with a public order offence after he charged the Queen's coffin during the lying in state. He was charged yesterday. Actually, the event happened on Friday. But joining me now to break down this mammoth operation, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. I mean, Mark, even getting in here tonight, you could see literally a wave of hundreds and hundreds of security guards just in order to protect this part of the palace that we're in. I mean, it's an operation like we've never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, we got a very eye-watering example of just how complex this security operation is when we had this state reception at Buckingham Palace earlier on tonight, with hundreds of world leaders and other dignitaries attending that, and they had to be escorted in, some on motorcades, others on buses, because there just is no practical way of taking hundreds of people in a secure bubble to the palace, and tomorrow, of course, to Westminster Abbey. So they had to go on these, they call it podding, onto buses, and they would have armed police on the buses. They had several armed vehicles around the bus and motorcycle escorts. A little undignified for those, of course, Dan, that are probably used to the fineries of a splendid motorcade, but that's just the practical realities of how you deal with such a large gathering of world leaders. We've never known the like in this country.
And Mark, it's not just London, of course, is it? Because the Queen's coffin then will be driven all the way to Windsor, where there's another procession in Windsor tomorrow afternoon, again attended by all the members of the royal family and many foreign dignitaries. So presumably there has to be a dual operation in London and Windsor.
Yes, a dual operation, actually an operation involving police forces from across the country. The 43 police forces in England and Wales. Only a couple of police forces are not represented in terms of the officers they have down here in the capital helping out with this mammoth operation. And the problem that the security services have, they would love to do like the Americans do, which is put this sterile bubble around their political leaders or their VIP. We don't do that in this country. It's accessibility. You've seen on more than one occasion now, our monarch and, of course, other members of the royal family just getting out of their vehicles, pressing the flesh, being close to the public, to their subjects. But that presents very significant security risks, because the thousands of people who will be gathered in around here, around Westminster Hall, all of the route, all the way in fact to Windsor, cannot be security vetted. You just can't put them through airport-style scanners and things like that. So you're just trusting that the security officers, the personnel along that route, are able to react if the worst was to happen. Hopefully it won't. And certainly the Americans, well, they don't care in a sense how we choose to conduct the security operation. They will always protect their own president in their own security bubble. We saw that tonight, Dan, with the Beast, as it's been called, and the US president's motorcade coming in here to Buckingham Palace. An impressive sight. Some of the other world leaders probably looking on in envy from their bus windows as they were coming in.
Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. I guess all we can do now is hope and pray that it goes off without a hitch tomorrow, but you will, of course, be covering it here on GB News throughout the day. Mark White, thank you so much. Now, tonight, as Mark just mentioned, leaders from around the world arrived at Buckingham Palace for a state reception hosted by King Charles ahead of Her late Majesty's funeral tomorrow, which is set to be one of the biggest gatherings of dignitaries in history. US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden, Canada's Justin Trudeau and France's Emmanuel Macron were among those in attendance. Meanwhile, the Princess of Wales met the First Lady of Ukraine, President Zelensky's wife, Olena Zelenska. Prince Harry and Meghan, however, found themselves out in the cold after their invite, reportedly sent in error, was rescinded. Now, the Sussexes discovered they were uninvited on account of them not being working royals via media reports. That's according to the US publication The New York Post. But have they brought this snub on themselves? Well, my superstar panellist, Dominique Samuel, she certainly thinks so, summing up the situation perfectly, in my opinion, when she tweeted, "It's sad that Harry isn't invited to attend his grandmother, the Queen's funeral reception, but if he wasn't writing a book about the royal family, I doubt any of this would be happening." Why would they invite someone who is likely to flog private details in his memoir? Meanwhile, the Sunday Times has reported on another behind-the-scenes row that could see this uneasy truce between Harry and his family collapse. A friend of the Duke, I was quite stunned by this actually, claimed he was heartbroken to learn that the ER initials of his grandmother had been removed from the military uniform he wore at last night's Lion and State Vigil of the Queen's grandchildren. He reportedly believed the move was, quote, very intentional and considered wearing a mourning suit despite his special exemption. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by the Daily Mail columnist consultant editor, Andrew Pearce. Andrew, I mean, I was stunned by this briefing from a friend of the Duke of Sussex to the Sunday Times today, because it just shows that even in the midst of this national mourning period, his victimhood knows no bounds.
Yeah, and I think we probably have a good idea who that friend is, Dan, because a certain person who wrote a book about Prince Harry and Meghan, which was incredibly favourable about them, often pops up briefing on behalf of the Duke of Sussex. Look, this is the most extraordinary event in my lifetime, both as a journalist and just an ordinary member of the public. The funeral of Elizabeth the Great, Queen Elizabeth II, world leaders pouring in from all around the world. And yet we're getting a report that Harry is whinging about whether some initials were removed from his military uniform or not. Look, he was lucky to be able to wear it because he's no longer a working royal. Prince Andrew's no longer a working royal. Exceptions were made for both of them by the king, but he's got to stop whinging. And he had absolutely no right to be at that reception tonight, Dan, because he is no longer a working royal. But what he wants to do the okie dokie. He wants to have his left foot in the royal family and his right foot out of the royal family in America, working for Netflix, working for Spotify, working for publishers, making an absolute killing, an absolute fortune in money, basically selling out the royal family. But when he's here, he thinks he should be able to attend this incredibly illustrious reception. Prince Andrew wasn't there. He's not a working royal anymore. Prince Harry wasn't there. He's not a working royal anymore. Prince Andrew actually was sacked from his public life by his mother, the Queen, because he paid, because of his disastrous Newsnight interview. Prince Harry chose to walk away with his lovely new wife, who he loves very much, He's got a new life in the United States. Prince Charles, the king, we must get used to saying that, referred to how much he loves Harry and Meghan and wishes them every success in their new life overseas. That's where he is now. He can't be thinking he can go to a glittering reception for world leaders, which, of course, would be all in his book or in her latest dreary, what do they call it, podcast.
Yes, very good point. I mean, it just fascinates me, though, Andrew Pearce, that despite their public proclamations of, oh, we're ever so happy to wear a morning suit, when Prince Charles actually does make the historic concession and says, no, I'm going to give you this opportunity, it's still not good enough. And to me, that's very indicative of what's to come over the next few months, because it's never good enough for them, Andrew. Nothing will be good enough.
No, and the fact is, the only way they are going to make money out of what they're doing out there in the United States, I'm afraid, is by selling out the royal family. We've seen it already in the Oprah interview, which was a disgrace. We've seen it in her podcast. The really damaging thing, though, Dan, he's written this book. It's written already. It will have to be updated because his grandmother has died. We think the book has been delayed till next year. If he's serious about mending bridges with the royal family, pull the book. He's a royal. He could say he doesn't want to do it anymore. He could get lawyers involved if he was deadly serious. But I'm afraid he's got to fund that lifestyle. And this episode over the VIP reception tonight, over the ER, which was unpicked from his suit, I suspect that will all be written into that memoir, which could become a terminal break, frankly, with the royal family, because we understand he's going to revisit all that stuff about Camilla, the infidelity with his father, Diana, his mother, of course, who he misses very much. But if he was really genuine, he knows his mother wouldn't want all this. He knows his mother would want the rift fixed between him and William. And he certainly knows that Diana would not want him inflicting great damage on the royal family. But he's married to Meghan. He's made his choice. He's decided to go for the millionaire lifestyle in the United States. So that means you don't get invited to a reception with the President of the United States. Oh, whoops. That's what she thinks she's going to be one day, doesn't she, Meghan?
Well, she does. Yes, she does indeed. And that is a thought, I think, Andrew, that horrifies all of us. But look, what I find most sad about this, Andrew, is that Charles and William have been so magnanimous this week. I mean, especially William. He is utterly furious. He remains incandescent with rage over the fact that Meghan went on Oprah Winfrey in front of the world and publicly attacked his beloved wife, Kate, when she knew that there was no way Kate was going to be able to respond publicly. He's not over that. But he invited Harry and Meghan for this public walkabout. Then in terms of Charles, we've seen the concession over the uniform. We've seen the loving message in the King's speech. I just feel so sad that the royal family have done so much to include Harry and Meghan this week, and it feels like still nothing's going to change.
No, they really have gone out of their way, because I didn't think they would back down on the uniform. Actually, I don't have a problem with Harry and Prince Andrew wearing those uniforms. They both did active service. Andrew in the Falkland Islands, he could have been killed. Harry twice in Afghanistan, potentially his life was on the line too. So I didn't have a big problem about that. But I do have a problem about him revealing this ER has been removed from his military uniform, because none of us would have known. None of us really know about the significance of it, but he clearly does. He's wearing his heart on his sleeve far too much here, isn't he? Because he could have just had that conversation with his family afterwards. And then, of course, we know about the reception tonight. Well, he was never going to go to that. And if you remember, Dan, after the Jubilee service at St. Paul's Cathedral for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, only 2 or 3 months ago, remember, he and Meghan did not pitch up at that reception at Guildhall, and they went straight back to Windsor, because I think they were deeply offended they hadn't been invited. Or if they were invited, what they were offended about most of all was they found they were in the second row, if you recall, in St. Paul's Cathedral, because he's not a front rank royal anymore. So he was behind the Duke of Gloucester, as I recall, and I think the Duke of Gloucester is 36th in line to the throne. He'd have been furious. But the Duke of Gloucester, 36 and 9 to the throne he may be, he's still a working royal, still slogging, doing his bit for the royal family, and he's about 82.
No, indeed, indeed. And they were so furious, Andrew, that they didn't want to get into the minivan with the other members of the royal family, like Zara and Mike Tindall, for example. And I think, look, when Zara and Mike Tindall turn on you, you know things are bad, because they're good people and they're kind people, and they've given so much patience to Harry over so many years and so much support. So I think it's very sad. He does have an opportunity when he gets back to the US to reflect and reconsider, but it sounds like you're not holding out much hope, Andrew.
And I'm sad about it, Dan. I was at Windsor for covering the wedding as a broadcaster and a print journalist, and the joy that was in the streets of Windsor. All this idea from Meghan that the public, we never took to her because we won't accept a woman of colour in the royal family. Look, I've got into big trouble for saying this before, and I'm still going to say it again. I think when I look at Meghan Markle, I just saw a very beautiful American actress, not a very well-known American actress, I might say, but I didn't look at her and think she's a black person. If she had been very, very black, great. The fact is, she is a woman of colour. She was welcomed into the royal family. But she I think, was planning very early on her escape route to the United States. And everybody blames Meghan, don't they? But hang on, Harry's the royal. Harry's gone along with all of this. He's done all this. And I think he caused much distress to his grandmother. And I hope he reflects on that too.
I hope he does as well. We adored them. We absolutely adored them as a couple. And look at how the red carpet has been rolled out this week for Meghan in the car with Sophie Wessex from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall. Sophie Wessex was viewed as a second daughter by the late Queen. So I'm sorry, we have done as a royal family, as a country, so much to welcome these two. Let's hope that they now pay us back. But I'm not holding my breath, and neither is the Daily Mail consultant editor, Andrew Pearce. Thank you so much, Andrew. Great to talk to you tonight. Now, our very own associate editor, Lucy Jones, was one of the tens of thousands of people who queued up this weekend in order to see the late Queen lying in state. Now, Lucy lined up for 13 hours with her mum and dad to pay her respects for the late Elizabeth the Great, joining the back of what I'm calling the Elizabeth line in Bermondsey. That was at 7 a.m. before the 6-mile journey along the bank of the Thames. And she was rewarded in one heck of a twist of fate by actually standing inside Westminster Hall at the moment King Charles himself walked in with his grieving siblings for his vigil by his mother's coffin. Wow, look at that moment, and you can see Lucy there in the background. Just incredible. Lucy, so when you started, by the way, well done for lining up. What an incredible moment. But how you were rewarded because you were there when Charles walked past.
I know. I mean, it was just completely, utterly overwhelming.
And you hadn't timed it. This was a coincidence.
No. I mean, we had no idea how long we were going to be queuing for. We thought it could be 9 hours, and we got there and we were held by security, and we thought, oh, we've missed them. I mean, it was just so surreal to be there in the first place to pay tribute to the Queen, and then to be there and just be centimetres from our new king and his siblings. I mean, it was just so surreal.
And so when you walked into the hall and you knew it was coming close to the Queen's children arriving, were you told? And did you have to go through any additional security because you were there at the same time as them?
No, there was no additional security. I mean, as soon as I walked into the hall, the first thing I noticed, well, the first person I noticed was our new Queen Consort, Camilla. I just saw her hair and
because
I thought...
she was watching?
Yeah, she was there, and she was stood next to Mike Tindall and Zara Phillips, and I thought, oh gosh, have they already been in and out? Because actually King Charles was slightly delayed, and we thought, oh, 9:30 we'd been held, 7:30 even we'd been held, and the time had been and gone. But we went in there, and I mean, it was like you could hear a pin drop. It was just silent, and then you hear the tapping of the guard,
yes,
making note that the vigil was about to begin. And yeah,
I mean, I was just so overwhelmed because firstly, it was surreal to be there to, you know, say thank you to our late Queen, let alone then to be there in the 15 minutes that the new king was there. So, yeah, I didn't know where to look.
Charles, Anne, Edward and Andrew all looked incredibly emotional watching it on the television. Did you pick that up from them being so close?
Yeah, I thought Charles looked, well, King Charles even looked so, I mean, sad, but the sheer synchronicity with which they walked into that hall was just incredible.
Oh, it was amazing.
And yeah, it was just amazing to see that.
And just finally, tell me about the queue itself. Was it worth it? And did you make lots of friends during that 13 hours? Because that seems to be the conclusion that most folk have.
Yeah, I mean, my boyfriend thought I was mad to do it in the first place, but it honestly didn't seem like 13 hours at all. And we made lots of friends. We made friends with a couple that had come from Swansea, a chap who'd come from Portsmouth, a young mother who was a chiropractor who actually said that she was getting calls from people who were having back problems from standing in the queue, which was quite funny. Yeah, people from all walks of life. And it was amazing because I thought, you know, if I was sat on a tube with these people any other day, I probably wouldn't have looked up at my phone and even said hello. And then by the end of it, you're like hugging them and they're your best friends. We had photos with them, as I'm sure you've shown. And yeah, it was just amazing. You're sharing your snacks with them. There's people pouring like nuts and sweets into your hands, left, right and centre. And yeah, it was just an incredible experience and totally worth doing. Which was, you know, an
absolutely
special thing as well.
I think it has been one of the me were there for that historic moment when the children stood vigil around the coffin. Our associate editor, Lucy Jones. Thank you so much, Lucy. Now, earlier on, I showed you that hysterical claim from the LBC presenter James O'Brien that the queue that we're just talking about to see the late Queen's coffin is actually, despite what Lucy says, some sort of confected plot from the establishment to overemphasise our country's grief. Look.
Somebody somewhere has very deliberately conceived a plan to have hundreds of thousands of people snaking through London, visibly, publicly and performatively queuing to pay their respects to the late Queen. Why have they done it like this? How, I don't want to say sinister, so I won't. The more I think about the very deliberateness of this, the more manipulated I feel.
Oh, please, please. So despite what James O'Brien would have you believe, the reality is that this nation's mourning for Queen Elizabeth II is undeniably genuine. Even anti-royalists, like my next guest, Laura Dodsworth, have confessed to being deeply moved by all the pomp and ceremony in the various memorials. And I'm delighted that Laura joins me now. So Laura, after 10 days of mourning, we will finally say goodbye to our late Queen Elizabeth tomorrow. And you've actually found this lengthy grieving process very constructive and also very instructive, I guess, about the way that Brits deal with death. Explain.
Sure. Oh goodness, that was a fascinating clip there of James O'Brien. I mean, if he's onto government manipulation, there's a book I'd like to recommend him called A State of Fear. That's so funny. I don't really know why he doubts the level of grief and the historic significance of this. Look, the Queen was a good Queen. She was a great Queen. She was also the best of British. You know, she represented the face that we were proud to represent us on the world stage. There's already been so much said about all of the values that she embodied, such as duty, service, religious belief, good sense, good humour. But she was more than that. She symbolised more. You know, she's the unchanging portrait that hangs in the village hall or the church. She's Christmas Day speeches and bunting. She's bank holidays and fates. She symbolises a sense of Britishness that I think people are worried is passing. I think there is this palpable sense of grief and uncertainty in the air that is about more than the death of a great queen, more than the death of a monarch. I think people have a feeling of a whole era passing. There's a feeling of history with a capital H happening right now. And I think people are worried about what comes next. If she's gone and all those values she represented, what's next? Do you remember when not very long ago politicians were scrambling to promise us a new normal, even if we didn't want it? Well, we've just come through this psychic shock of lockdowns and a pandemic. We've had a really difficult few years. And I think people know there are more difficult times ahead, especially with the winter and the economic crisis ahead of us. And her death feels like this punctuation point. She was always there, so what next? So first of all, I think there is a grief, there is an uncertainty, and I think it's making us confront death. And like you say, Dan, there is this amazing pomp and circumstance around these slow 10 days of mourning. There was a poet who was alive in the time of Queen Elizabeth I called John Donne, and he wrote some beautiful prose. The lines, you'll probably be familiar with these lines. Send not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. When anybody dies, it makes us think about our own death. It's a memento mori, if you will. And there is no death in our lifetime which is more significant than the Queen. So that there are miles of people snaking through London in commemoration of this is really no great surprise. So in the last few years, we've seen people buried very hurriedly and with very little ceremony. But in this death, everything is slow. We have 10 days of ancient pageantry and pomp and circumstance. And you're right, I'm a fan of the Queen, but I am not a royalist. But, even if you're not a royalist, the trumpets, the vaulted arches, the beautiful colours, the stateliness, just the sheer beauty and the slowness of it, can't fail to impress you and move you and touch you on some level. So I think there's a way in this time that people are being forced to confront in a very gentle way their relationship with death.
And Laura, to sum it up in 30 seconds, that was beautiful, by the way, but the emotions that people are feeling and the desire to queue up and share in this mutual grief, that is real.
I'm sure it's real. Of course it's real. She was a queen, she was a mother, she was a grandmother, but she's also been the ruler of this country for many decades. So people feel this not just at a conscious level, but also an unconscious level. And people need meaning. They need things to create meaning and to represent meaning in their lives. Rituals are hugely important for human beings, especially those rituals that are around birth and death. And it's no surprise to me to see people lining the streets. Millions will be watching on TV around the world. We have an ancient tradition in this country, people lining the streets.
And they will be watching tomorrow. Indeed, Laura Dodsworth, author of A State of Fear. So good to get your perspective on this, Laura. Thank you. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. I'm Dan Wootton, live at Buckingham Palace with a special show ahead of the nation's final goodbye to our late Queen tomorrow, as Elizabeth the Great is honoured with the biggest state funeral of all time. Earlier tonight, Her late Majesty's loyal subjects stepped outside their doors and gathered together for a minute of silence, thanks to commemorate her 70 years of service. Meanwhile, 500 heads of state and dignitaries, including US President Joe Biden, gathered at Buckingham Palace to pay their respects. But in their latest royal snub, Prince Harry and Meghan were not there to greet them after their invite was rescinded. We all know what the scorned Sussexes are capable of, but I say it's time for them to put the Queen's wishes for a united royal family ahead of their quest for revenge. We're going to be discussing that with Kinsey Schofield at 10:45. As the Duke of York praises the role of his mummy, is King Charles right to attempt to stop Andrew and fellow non-working royals Harry and Beatrice from deputising for him, as reported today? I'll debate that next with my superstar panel. Tonight, I'm joined by the writer and media personality Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the journalist and royal commentator Angela Levin. Why is the liberal US media now calling for race reparations from the royal family as they step up their ghoulish anti-monarchy campaign? Well, former Margaret Thatcher aide Niall Gardner speaks out on this live here at 10:20 plus, with just hours left to see Her Majesty's lying in state. Were this morning duo, Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, wrong to jump ahead of mourners at Westminster Hall? The ITV damage control campaign has gone into overdrive, and so has my superstar panel's sense of outrage. So we're going to debate this at 10:30. This is GB News, live at Buckingham Palace on the eve of Her Majesty the Queen's state funeral. Earlier today, US President Joe Biden paid his respects to Queen Elizabeth II as he signed a book of condolence after attending her lying in state.
She was the same in person as her image, decent, honorable, and all about service. So to all the people of England, all the people of the United Kingdom, our hearts go out to you, and you were fortunate to have had her for 70 years. We all were. The world's better for her.
Tonight, the nation as a whole, led by Prime Minister Liz Truss at Downing Street, also paid a touching tribute to Her late Majesty, falling silent at 8 p.m. in memory of our fallen leader. Back with me now, US royal commentator Kinsey Schofield. So, Kinsey, Joe Biden is here. He actually was here earlier for the state reception. Britain is going to stop tomorrow. Is America going to be watching the Queen's state funeral?
Hotel lobbies are getting together for events, apartment complexes, the common areas. It's becoming an event. People, I think what this death has done is it's unified people all over the world. They want to watch this. They want to digest it. It's almost like Where's Waldo? You want to see who's at the funeral, who you recognize. But I think that people are hurting. They're mourning the Queen. She was an incredible woman. But there's also an excitement in the air about the King Charles reign. People are looking forward to seeing what happens. Yeah.
So actually, Kinsey, outside of Britain, there is a sense, actually, that King Charles might do a good job after this week.
Absolutely. It's also curiosity, if I'm being honest with you. It's curiosity, but I do think that you have 70 years to prepare for a job. I'd hope that you'd, go guns blazing.
But Kinsey, obviously you are one of the many Americans who maintain a real love for Princess Diana. I mean, you host a podcast about the late princess.
Yes.
So how do you rationalise a King Charles, a Queen Camilla, with the continued love for Princess Diana? Because of course, let's be honest, this was Princess Diana's worst nightmare.
Prayer. No, I mean, it's taken a lot to get here. I think seeing his address, I do believe the man has changed.
I think he has.
Yeah, in his youth, he did seem like the Playboy prince. In his youth, it did feel like perhaps he made some selfish decisions, but he truly is making sacrifices right now, and we are seeing that with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. There are severe sacrifices being made right now, egos having to be put aside so that things are calm. And so I do think that he's a changed man. And, Camilla specifically, she has done so many wonderful things over the years, fully supported King Charles. And I'm sorry, but I'm a fan.
No. And a lot of Princess Diana's former close friends believe that by now she would actually have reconciled with both Charles and Camilla. I mean, it's hard to know.
Right.
But a lot has changed.
There were comments made to Prince William before she died. And she was saying, I want to find something like your father has found. So she recognized
She appreciated it was a real love story.
Absolutely. So she recognized that King Charles and Camilla, were genuine. And so I agree with you that by now, I do think that she would have moved on, been happy for them. In this particular instance, I don't know, I'm sure she would be a little bit crushed because, as she told Martin Bashir, against her will, maybe, you know, she never thought she'd be the queen, but she wanted to be the queen of people's hearts. So that's I struggle with that. But yes, I love Diana, but I think it's okay to look forward to see what King Charles does next.
Well, no, she was the queen of our hearts, and it is fascinating, isn't it, Kinsey? It's good to actually have a little mention of the late, great Princess Diana tonight, because what we're going to see tomorrow is going to be the biggest event this country has seen since the funeral of Princess Diana some 25 years ago. Many folk actually think it will end up being a bigger event, Kinsey Schofield, but I guess time will tell. We will know by this time tomorrow night, and you'll be joining me because we've got more news on Harry and Meghan and exactly what's going on with their latest victimhood claims. So Kinsey Schofield, stand by for that. We'll be talking about it very soon. But first, before all of that, the latest headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Dan. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. King Charles has issued a message of thanks to the nation on the eve of his mother, the late Queen's funeral. Charles said he wants to offer his gratitude to all those countless people who have been such a support and comfort to his family and himself in this time of grief. He also said he and the Queen consort were deeply touched by the many messages they'd received from around the world. People across the UK have observed a minute's silence as part of a national moment of reflection for the Queen ahead of her funeral tomorrow. A warning: the following contains flashing images. Mourners all over the country fell silent and bowed their heads, followed by a round of applause. Prime Minister Liz Truss and her husband were among those taking part and stood outside number 10 at Downing Street. There will also be a 2-minute silence at the end of the state funeral service tomorrow at 11:55 a.m. Queen Consort Camilla paid her own tribute to the late Queen, addressed to the nation in a TV broadcast. She spoke of her great influence on the nation.
She has been part of our lives forever. I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being there. It must have been so difficult for her being a solitary woman. There weren't women prime ministers or women presidents. She was the only one, so I think she carved her own role.
Well, earlier, King Charles hosted a reception for world leaders at Buckingham Palace ahead of the Queen's funeral tomorrow. US President Joe Biden was among those in attendance after paying his respects to the Queen at Westminster Hall. He says the world is a better place because of Her Majesty. Around 500 world leaders and dignitaries have been invited to attend the state funeral tomorrow. Presidents, prime ministers and royals from across the globe came together as guests of the monarch. Mourners looking to join the queue to see the Queen's coffin are now being asked to head to London Bridge. Thousands of people are still waiting to file past Her Majesty's coffin, with the waiting time now around 7 hours. Westminster Hall will close to the public at 6:30 tomorrow morning. Mourners are gathering in key locations along the route of Her Majesty's funeral procession. Many have brought their own tents as they prepare to camp out overnight to secure the best spots. Popular places to pitch up include Parliament Square near Westminster Hall. Authorities are asking those hoping to attend to plan well in advance, with huge crowds expected. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Welcome back to Buckingham Palace, one day ahead of the Queen's state funeral. And let's take a look now at tomorrow's historic newspaper front pages. And this is amazing, actually. Look at this. a brand new, never-before-seen picture of the Queen. And it's taking up all of the Daily Express front page with the gorgeous headline, "Farewell, our glorious Queen." Now, Her late Majesty, we believe this photograph was taken of Her late Majesty in May, ahead of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, and it shows the monarch beaming brightly for the camera at her home at Windsor Castle. The image was taken by the photographer Ronald McKechnie. He also took the Jubilee portrait of the Queen, released to mark the start of the national festivities of her milestone 70-year reign. So there's the story behind that stunning photograph. Doesn't she look brilliant? And it's fascinating to think that was just a few months ago. Britain reaches a turning point, is how The Independent is characterising the death of the late Queen. They run that headline alongside an image of Elizabeth II with her crown jewels atop the coffin. "Thank you, Ma'am," says the Metro, with a stunning old image, actually, of Her late Majesty. And "World's Farewell to Elizabeth II" is the headline of the I newspaper, beside a picture of some of the hundreds of thousands gathering in London to pay tribute to the late monarch. Let me bring in my superstar panel now, the broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, the Conservative commentator the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the Royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin. Now, breaking tonight, King Charles has released a new statement saying he and the Queen Consort have been, quote, so deeply touched by the many messages of condolence and support received from this country and across the world. He added, in London, Edinburgh, Hillsborough and Cardiff, we were moved beyond measure by everyone who took the trouble to come and pay their respects to the lifelong service of my dear mother, the late Queen. As we all prepare to say our last farewell, I wanted to simply take this opportunity to say thank you to all those countless people who have been such a support and comfort to my family and myself in this time of grief. Now, earlier today, the Duke of York also paid tribute to his mother with a statement that said, "Mummy, Mother, Your Majesty, 3 in 1. It has been an honour and privilege to serve you." And as you can see, there was an accompanying photo of Andrew being cradled by the late Queen as a baby. But a new row has erupted concerning the disgraced Duke of York after it came to light that he was still a Councillor of State and could potentially stand in for King Charles as monarch. However, in a very significant potential constitutional development, according to the Sunday Telegraph, the King is planning to amend the near 100-year law so that only working members of the royal family can act as his official standard. Now, currently, the exiled Prince Andrew and Prince Harry maintain ties to the throne by acting as councillors of state, which means that if King Charles falls ill or is absent from duties, they are in line to temporarily take over. That privilege derives from the 1937 Regency Act, which stipulates that councillors of state are the spouse of the monarch and the next 4 people in line to the throne who are aged over 21. For Charles, this includes his wife, Camilla, the Queen Consort, his sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, his brother, Prince Andrew, and his niece, Princess Beatrice. However, neither Harry, Andrew or Beatrice are working royals, and should the King go ahead with this major constitutional shift, he will write Harry and Andrew out of royal life forevermore. Beatrice too, by the way. So, Christine Hamilton, there's been a lot of controversy around the councillors of state issue. I think this would be the right move from the King. Do you?
99% of the population were unaware of this act and unaware of its implications, but it's archaic and it's outlived its usefulness. I don't think one has to dwell any longer as to why either Harry and Andrew would not be suitable, but with no disrespect to her at all, she's actually a jolly nice girl. Beatrice, it is absurd that she might stand in for the King. So I think it is high time that this archaic act was changed, and apparently the motions are already in play to get this going through Parliament. Needless to say, there's been the usual complaint from a bitter Labour MP who strikes a discordant note saying, are we just robots to carry out the wishes of the monarchy? Well, yes, in this instance you are. You don't have to vote for it if you don't want to, so vote against it. But I can't think in a million years that same Labour MP really wants to have Andrew coming to open Parliament one day because everybody else higher up the line is unavailable. So, no, this desperately needs changing. And for heaven's sake, we have got two people who are absolutely tailor-made for the job in Princess Anne, the greatest queen we never had, and the Earl of Wessex, both of whom would make a fabulous job of it. So, yes, quite right, change it.
Yeah, Angela Levin, that's the absurdity of all of this, isn't it? Princess Anne is not one of the councillors of state because when they changed the Act, they didn't make it retrospective in terms of the gender of our future monarchs.
Yes, I think that a lot of people have been asking for the Queen to deal with it and saying, you know, you've just got to get rid of them, and quite right too. But of course she couldn't. It had to be a government decision. And I'm very pleased that Prince Charles is looking after this very quickly. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense to have somebody who lives in California dealing with signing papers and things like that, and he couldn't possibly come and represent the Queen because they're trying to do a parallel royal family, aren't they, over there? So I think it's absolutely right, and the quicker the better, actually, to have the people, as we've said, that are actually suitable for this and will do a very good job and can be relied on. Apparently, because of changes in the way this is going to run, that Queen Consort could also be one, and so could Catherine. So there's 4 terrifically good people who are ready and waiting and just absolutely dedicated to their life as royals, who would be excellent. So you can't have people who are not working royals doing this job.
Calvin Robinson, I agree with all of that from Angela, but this would also be a very popular move by the new king, wouldn't it? Because it would be him putting his foot down and saying, Harry, you've made your choice, you're not going to be a councillor of state, but also, Calvin, it would answer the Prince Andrew question, which, while this rule is in place, continues to hang over the new king.
Absolutely. I don't think it's something that he has to do, but I do think it is the right thing to do. And it shows that King Charles is in touch with the popular opinion, which is important if he wants to maintain the monarchy going forward. And it shows a maturity in him as a king that I didn't necessarily see in him as a prince. And I think we'll see more of that as we see the ontological change once he's anointed king in the procedures that will follow shortly.
Yeah, no, indeed. So, Christine Hamilton, I would say he's got to get on with this. This should be one of his first moves, because actually, if King Charles tells Parliament this is a priority of his, they will do it. They will do it.
Of course they will, and it would only be the most sort of mean-minded and, frankly, rather warped MP who wouldn't vote for it. I mean, as I said earlier, I cannot believe that any of the MPs who hate the monarchy and hate the whole business and who don't feel that they want to be used as a tool of the monarchy to do their bidding, I can't think in a million years that they would want the people who are currently on the list. So in their own best interests, they should do it. And yes, they should get on with it. It could be done, it won't take long, it could be done even with everything else that is pressing in on the government and about which is going to come crashing around all our heads from Tuesday, Wednesday onwards. It will be back to reality. They just have to find time for it. It really won't take long.
Yeah, and we are back to normal, by the way, from Tuesday night here at 9 o'clock, because there is a heck of a lot of important politics coming up next week, and it needs to be discussed. But this weekend, the new king visited Wales with the Queen Consort as part of his Four Nations tour, a trip that happened to coincide with a holiday marking the last proclamation of the last native Prince of Wales, a title Charles III held for a record 64 years. And some in the country want abolished, or some in the nation want abolished. Now Welsh actor Michael Sheen, who was such a staunch Republican, he handed back his OBE in 2017, has come out against the new king, calling the timing of the visit, quote, insensitive to the point of insulting, and complaining it had overshadowed the occasion. Oh yes, he's at it again, watch.
It was Owain Glyndŵr who proclaimed himself and then led a rebellion that went on for 15 years, but was eventually crushed, and that was the last time Wales had a native Prince of Wales. And so this day, September the 16th, is important to many people in Wales because of that, because it marks the moment where Glyndŵr claimed the title of Prince of Wales again. So those two things are obviously connected. And to choose this day, September the 16th, to come here as his first visit as king seems full of meaning. On the one hand, if it's chosen deliberately, then I'm sure many people would feel that that is quite insulting.
Please, if only Mr. Sheen would knock it off for just 1 week. Just 1 week during the national mourning period. Ah, goodness me. Now, the dignity and respect shown for the Queen continues in droves across Britain, but the American liberal media still won't let up. The latest monarchy hit piece from across the Atlantic is an eye-rolling op-ed on the Daily Beast website from woke Democrat-loving writer Wajahat Ali. In a frankly naive attempt to use our nation's grief to push his own victimhood, Ali calls for the new King Charles to apologise for the British Empire while demanding reparations. He writes, Charles should then use the royal family's immense wealth for reparations, starting with the descendants of Africans who were enslaved by the royal family. It's time to end the ridiculous pomp and pageantry, pour out the alcohol on the outdated institution that built itself on the bones, blood and ruin of so many nations and people. Now, the American MSM, which is heavily slanted to the left, have seemingly been brainwashed by the poor me fairy tales of woke Harry and Meghan. The New York Times thought they scored a huge win last week by highlighting the obvious fact that the Queen's funeral tomorrow would be funded by taxpayers, no kidding. MSNBC, CNN and others have also had similar pathetic takes. Watch.
See Harry get out first, then you saw Meghan, and then the other two royals as well.
Andrew, are you really denying what I just said about British colonialism? Are you really doing that, Andrew? Are you really doing that?
We abolished slavery.
Andrew, this is not a propaganda show. Andrew, I need you to stop. I need you to stop for a second. I need you to stop for a second. Are you really taking issue with the horrors of colonialism, Andrew?
I'm certainly taking issue with your remarks about slavery, which we abolished 32 years before you did, and we didn't have to kill 600,000 people in a civil war over it.
The wealth of this empire was derived on the back of the people of their empire.
On display in the palace.
Right, on display everywhere, and in the crown and everywhere. So what we're saying is that there is the generation of multicultural and diverse Britons who want this answered, who want to see their monarch finally talk about what it means and what, you know, potentially the idea of reparations, definitely justice, right? Justice.
Joining me now is Margaret Thatcher's esteemed former aide, Niall Gardner. Now, Niall, the attacks from Britain by the American left-wing media have actually been relentless over the past week. Even though they want to continue covering our late Queen, they seem to be obsessed with doing so through this particular lens. Tell me, that's not really how Americans feel, is it? Because you're obviously living over there now.
Well, Dan, great to talk to you this evening, and such a momentous time for Great Britain and for the whole free world. And the attacks that you are seeing from the American woke left against the British monarchy, against the British people, against British history, they're an absolute disgrace. They are sneering at critiques, basically, based upon, frankly, tremendous ignorance. The people writing these pieces, the New York Times, Washington Post, for example, they know nothing about Britain's history. They are simply firing shots at the United Kingdom. They are launching assaults on the British monarchy. The woke left sees the monarchy as a threat to their sort of liberal world order, as it were. They see the monarchy as representing tradition. They see the monarchy as representing British history, and we should be tremendously proud of Britain's great past. After all, the British people really, I think in many ways, led the free world for centuries. The British were at the forefront of abolishing slavery, for example. They defeated the might of Nazi Germany together with the United States, fighting against the forces of fascism. The British have so much to be proud of. And now you have this sneering American woke left who are completely divorced from reality. They're out of touch with where most of the American people are. The vast majority of Americans love the Queen, love the British monarchy, love Great Britain. The special relationship is incredibly strong. It has been the beating heart of the free world for so many decades. And so the woke liberal elites launching their nefarious, nasty attacks on the United Kingdom at this time, they do not represent the American people at all.
No, and I'm so glad to hear that, Niall. It's also so hypocritical, isn't it? Because, of course, they want to keep covering the Queen because she's great for business. She's really good for the ratings. So they keep on doing that. Then you've got folk like Christiane Amanpour there from CNN. Well, is she going to be handing back her CBE? Which stands for Commander of the Order of the British Empire,
exactly.
The British Empire, which she seems to be so desperately ashamed of.
Yes, absolutely. You're pointing out the massive hypocrisy of the liberal elites. And Christiane Amanpour, for example, of CNN, perfect example of that. She's calling for Britain to pay reparations here. This is based upon, frankly, just sheer ignorance, actually, and also tremendous hypocrisy here.
And by the way, what happened to CNN becoming a straight news broadcaster?
Yeah, exactly. I think they gave that up a long time ago, quite clearly here. I'm really struck by the nastiness that we're seeing from the US left, the vitriol, the hatred, because they thrive off this anger and hatred. It's all they have, really, actually. Whereas here in Great Britain, we have a tremendously positive view of the world, and Britain has been at the heart of the free world for centuries upon centuries, and will continue to be so. The monarchy is at the very heart of Britain's great leadership on the world stage.
One thing that's really struck me, Niall, is that a lot of these media organisations that seem to be taking this tact appear to be allies of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. So, for example, the New York Times, they've done a lot with, and The Cut, which is the New York magazine that most recently ran that very incendiary interview with Meghan, where she made a whole load of threats to the monarchy. By the way, when the Queen was on her literal deathbed, was having to deal with the fallout for that coverage, ran a revolting attack on King Charles last week, even falsely accusing him, by the way, of being the royal racist, which is a completely unproven, untrue accusation.
Exactly.
So do they have to worry about the company that they keep, or is this a purposeful thing that the Sussexes are doing to align themselves with this hard left
I think
faction of the US media?
Meghan Markle especially has been a tragedy for the royal family. I mean, her attacks upon the British monarchy have been immensely mean-spirited. I think the American people are increasingly turning against her because of her relentless attacks upon the British monarchy, which is very popular among Americans. Of course, the British public has turned dramatically against her, but also, unfortunately, Harry as well has been dragged along by Meghan's negativity here. And I think Harry's image has been hugely damaged on both sides of the Atlantic. But Meghan Markle in particular, her vicious attacks upon the royal family, the accusations of racism, completely unfounded here, complete disinformation, absolutely appalling to see, actually, and she has been, I think, an absolute disaster for the British monarchy.
Now, just stand by with me for 1 second, because we've got some breaking news. It has been confirmed in the past minute that Prince George and Princess Charlotte will attend the Queen's state funeral tomorrow. That's according to the order of service. The 9-year-old future king and his 7-year-old sister will gather with 2,000 people in Westminster Abbey to remember their late great-grandmother as millions watch the televised service across the globe. The young royals will walk through the Gothic church with the royal family in procession behind the Queen's coffin as it is carried by the military bearer party. Their grandfather, the King, with the Queen Consort, will process immediately behind the coffin, followed by the Princess Royal and Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, then the Duke of York, followed by the Earl and Countess of Wessex. The Prince and Princess of Wales will be after, right in front of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, as the estranged brothers reunite once more to say goodbye to their grandmother. So, Niall, beautiful to hear that all of the family will be here. I'm particularly heartened, though, I said it earlier in the show, that the future king, Prince George, will be there. That is such a moment to show the strength and the future of our monarchy. Plus, by the way, at 9 years old, I think this is something that for his future, he will want to be able to say that he was there to say goodbye to Queen Elizabeth the Great.
Absolutely. I think a very important moment for the monarchy. I think the monarchy is very secure for generations to come, actually. So I think this is a very significant step. I think it's a very important one, and I think it's the right step forward. And I think the monarchy will grow from strength to strength.
Does it put a lot of pressure on George and Charlotte?
I think I think they will really, I think, rise to the occasion. Actually, so we are talking about Britain's future here,
and they'll
the
be
future of the
with their
monarchy. Absolutely, and I think this is a brave step, but I think it's the right one.
It's good optics as well. What do you make of these optics, by the way, of William and Harry once again walking behind the Queen's coffin? I mean, that's going to be another... I mean, there's going to be a lot of pictures tomorrow, Niall, that we'll never forget. I have a feeling that will be one of them. Of course, awkwardly for Harry in this case, because we know his feelings on this, he will be in morning suit, William will be in military uniform.
Yeah, I think very, very significant. We are seeing unity within the royal family. I think that's very important. It's very good to see. And I hope that, based upon what we have seen over the last few days, that we will see an entirely different approach taken by Meghan and Harry towards the monarchy. I think Harry may well be open to that. But in the case of Meghan, I think her track record suggests otherwise. We are dealing with a figure of tremendous narcissism in the case of Meghan Markle. And she has inflicted a lot of damage on the royal family. But I hope that she will learn from these past few days. The unity of the royal family is very, very important. But she needs to demonstrate that she is willing to work together with the royal family, that she has the heart to do so, and she must put behind all her vindictiveness, I think, towards the royals, which has been very, very destructive. So we'll have to see what happens next.
I hope you're right, Niall. I really do, but I don't hold out much hope, to be completely honest,
exactly,
if we look at her track record.
Yes, precisely.
That is Niall Gardner, former aide, of course, to Margaret Thatcher, responding to that breaking news that Prince George and Princess Charlotte will be part of the royal procession at tomorrow's state funeral for Queen Elizabeth II. Wow, that is going to be quite a moment, isn't it? Let's take a look now at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. First up, what are we going to first? I think the Daily Telegraph, which is leading with this amazing new, beautiful, beaming image of the late Queen as they salute her life of selfless service. The Daily Mail get ready to say our last farewell to the country's greatest ever monarch. They also quote the King's new message to Britain tonight, in which he said he was moved beyond measure by Britain's outpouring of grief. God bless, says the Sun, alongside a picture of the late monarch. Oh, that's the new picture again. And a look at the order of service for the funeral tomorrow. I just love this picture. It's a brand new image. It was taken before the Platinum Jubilee. The Daily Star declares Britain a kingdom united as it reports on tonight's National Minute silence and that new portrait of Her Majesty. And The Guardian's distinctly understated splash leads with world leaders descending as the nation prepares for grandest of farewells. Here again, though, is that spectacular new portrait of the Queen that we are now able to share with you. Let me tell you a few details about this. It was taken in May at Windsor Castle ahead of the Platinum Jubilee celebrations by the photographer Ranald McKenzie. He also took the Jubilee portrait of the Queen, released to mark her milestone 70-year reign, and she's wearing aquamarine and a diamond clip brooches, which were an 18th birthday present from her father in 1944. And goodness me, wasn't she looking happy and glorious just a few weeks ago? My superstar panel back with me now, the broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton, the conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and the royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin. Now, on Thursday night, when I was last with you, I expressed my outrage that MPs were able to take 4 pals and jump the queue to see the Queen lying in state. Politicians, parliamentary staff members and accredited political journalists said stuff it to a 15-hour wait with the pleb Joe public and instead waltzed in ahead of all of us. But over the weekend, we've seen 2 more stark examples of how celebrities dealt with the situation. David Beckham, someone who recently I've been highly critical of, actually, because of his horrible PR deal with Qatar. But for once, he absolutely did the right thing morally when it came to seeing the Queen. He queued up like the rest of us.
We all want to be here together. We all want to experience something where we celebrate the amazing life of our Queen. And I think, you know, something like this today is meant to be shared together. So, you know, the fact that we've been here, we're eating Pringles, we're eating sherbet lemons, you know, we're eating sandwiches, having coffee, so donuts.
Big respect to him. He's stood with us and he's paid his respects how he wants to. Yeah. And I think that's amazing.
But for the likes of ITV's Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, fresh off the back of their electricity bill game show controversy, they've become public enemy number 1 for skipping the queue and marching right into Westminster Hall. One woman tweeted that her disabled mother, who waited 13 hours, was, quote, ushered out of the way so Holly and Phil could go past. ITV hit back with a statement. They're in serious damage control mode. They said, hello, everyone. We would like to clarify something. We asked Philip and Holly to be part of a film for this Tuesday's programme. They did not jump the queue, have VIP access or file past the Queen lying in state, but instead were there in a professional capacity as part of the world's media to report on the event. But that's not been good enough for my superstar panellist Christine Hamilton, who went viral with this furious tweet. Christine wrote, "Is this the real Philip Schofield? Has he really queued for 30 hours? Has he, hell? What in God's name is he doing? Who the hell does he think he is?" And Christine, I'm sorry, that ITV statement doesn't solve the issue for me. It doesn't make sense. I don't even know if I believe it, Christine, because This Morning with Holly and Phil isn't even on screen at the moment. It's not back until Tuesday. So it just seems like a big fat excuse to me.
You're right, and the statement that you've just read out didn't make sense. It didn't clarify it. It didn't, you know, I then retweeted that and asked a few more questions, and they haven't been clarified. I mean, to me, I understand why some people have to queue jump. Of course they do. Of course they do. Theresa May didn't, by the way, as well as David Beckham. Susanna Reid didn't, who's another ITV presenter, who's a hard-working journalist. She queued with her mother. If they can all do it, why the hell can't Philip and Holly? And it just seemed they're there, presenters of a daytime television show. What are they going to bring to the show on Tuesday that they couldn't have done without going there? I'll tell you who really showed the way is our own Lucy Jones, who you interviewed earlier. There's Lucy, works in television. She's a television journalist. She could have probably tried to get a press pass, but she didn't. She queued after a long day's work or night's work. She queued with her mum, and that's the way it should be done. And there's somebody else I want to mention, and I'm just going to make sure I get this right. A chap called Frank Wells, who is a 96-year-old war veteran. He saw King George V lie in state in 1936. That's how old he is. He joined the accessible queue for the disabled. There was, even for that, there was a 6-hour queue. Now, if he can do that, Why couldn't Philip and Holly? I think it's deeply disrespectful to all the other people who did queue. And by the way, can I just say that I don't think anybody who queued will regret a single minute of that queuing. Their feet might, their back might, but they won't, and they will be so glad they've done it. But I think I'd be very interested to have a really proper explanation from ITV. I'm not going to watch on Tuesday morning to see what they put out, but I cannot believe that it will be in any way enhanced by Holly and Phil to say they didn't walk past. We saw them walking past. It's just unbelievable for ITV to say they didn't walk past. They did. They walked straight past the line and had priority access. Extraordinary.
Calvin Robinson, it's been interesting because since I've gone public about this, I have had some MPs approach me privately and say that for security reasons, in light of the David Amos stabbing, for example, it would be impossible for MPs to line up in a queue of 12 hours. So, OK,
most people don't know
I'll
what
accept
MPs
that,
look
Calvin.
like.
But what about their 4 friends?
So I have no problem whatsoever with MPs, because it is their place of work, to go and pay their respects to Her late Majesty. I think they can represent their constituents. That's fine. For them to take 4 guests, I think is inappropriate and out of order. But I wasn't actually incensed by the Philip and Holly situation until I saw that rebuttal from this morning that you just read out, because I think it's an outright lie. Because the media passes enable people to stand on the media platform so they can observe, for historical sake, what's going on. They don't allow people to cut across the queue. There's no need for the media to walk past the coffin and pay their respects in that way, because they're working. They're not there to pay their respects. They're there to observe people paying their respects. That's the job of the media. So I think what they're doing here is playing word games and outright lying. And what, I was messaging you at the time, Dan, what got on my nerves was the fact that Holly's still wearing a mask. I mean, what's that about? I mean, Philip's been wearing a mask for years, but Holly's wearing one quite publicly. I don't get it, what the point of it is. And there are many, many good people. Our mutual friend Christo Fufas queued up for hours and hours. There are many, many good people in the media that took the time to queue up, to pay their respects to Her late Majesty, as well as they can report on it afterwards in the media if they want to. I think that's the appropriate way to do things. I have a lot of time and respect for everyone who did queue. I think it's a great thing.
Absolutely. Belinda DeLucy and Dawn Neeson, members of our Superstar panel, also queued up. And I'm just very interested, Angela Levin, to see what exactly are Holly and Philip going to broadcast on Tuesday. What's so important about this broadcast on Tuesday that meant they thought they were better than the rest of us, Angela?
Yes, well, it's even more ridiculous, because if you want to go back and report on the atmosphere, which we've heard so much from ordinary people, the feeling, the passionate feeling, the overwhelming respect that you have to be in that hall. And so if they rush in and rush out, they're not going to really be able to get anything of value that is deep and profound. It's just going to be superficial, isn't it? It's just going to go through it verbatim, as it were. You can't. I think it is terribly disgraceful, and I agree exactly about the mask. At first, I thought it was perhaps to hide herself so no one would notice her crawling in, but actually not if she has Philip right behind her. But perhaps she didn't know. But I just thought it was just very poor taste, actually. People haven't minded queuing for 16, 17, 18 hours, but what they do mind is the sort of casualness and that I'm better than you type of attitude that is really very, very irritating and totally negative to the whole atmosphere of the room and the people there.
Yeah, Christine Hamilton, I know, for example, in your case, you would have loved to have been in the queue, but for health reasons, you were unable to. I would have loved to have been in the queue, but I've been working non-stop, as you know, these past 12 days. But I would not have dreamed of accepting some sort of queue jump. I wouldn't have even considered it for a single second. And by the way, I think, to me, this sums up the attitude of the Westminster elite, because it's not just the MPs, it's their mates, it's their friends in the media, it's famous people who always think They're better than us. And I feel like this pushback against Holly and Philip, and you've got to maybe feel a little bit sorry about them, but the pushback is because what we're saying is we're pushing back against the elite in this country, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. And what it says to me, it smacks of a sense of entitlement. And that is the one thing that the Queen's reign did not represent. She never gave the impression that she felt entitled to anything. Her whole life was a life of service and giving, giving, giving. People can snipe and sneer about the amount of money she gets, etc., etc. But her whole life was one of service. And this queue-hopping business, for no good reason. There are people, of course, and the accessibility queue, which the disabled have been able to use, was obviously going to have to be done. And apparently, by the way, it was incredibly well done. And people with quite serious disability problems that need special arrangements to cater for them, that was all dealt with. So that was beautifully done. But no, it's the sense of entitlement that I found so... And the look on Philip's face, that photograph where he was caught red-handed, basically says it all. Oh, crumbs.
No, indeed. And Christine Hamilton, yeah, there he is. There's that image. Christine Hamilton, I can tell you, breaking tonight, the queue, the Great Elizabeth Line, is now officially closed.
Oh.
It is now impossible to line up unless you're already in the line. The folk that are there now will be able to get in to Westminster Hall before 6:30 a.m. when access to the public shuts. So well done to everyone queuing up overnight. If you haven't done so yet, you have missed your opportunity. Christine Hamilton, Calvin Robinson, Angela Levin, thank you so much. Do stand by. Now, I don't know about you, but I've really appreciated the little heartwarming moments that have emerged during this sad time for our country. And this is one of my favourites. It's about the Elizabeth line. Total strangers, Jack and Zoe, well, they hit it off, meeting for the first time in the queue to see the Queen line and state on Friday night. Come Saturday afternoon, the pair had built up such chemistry that when they were interviewed about their experiences in the Elizabeth line, the nation smelt the start of a real-life rom-com with Meet Cutie. See what I did there? Being pitched as a working title. Look.
We met at like 10:30 last night. We've been with each other throughout the whole thing till now, yeah. We've actually got loads of things in common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So will you stay in touch? Yeah,
100%. We're going to the funeral on Monday together.
Are you?
Yeah.
We want to be there and sort of share that moment, I
Yeah.
guess, with someone else. Meeting you guys was like a blessing in disguise because it was like, I thought I was going to be exhausted, but like it's just gone so quickly in the queue.
How have you kept each other going? Have there been tricks of the trade?
No, just I guess like just like sharing
Laughs.
stories, having laughs and like banter.
Good
and
chat.
Yeah, good
great
chat.
chat, great
Yeah,
chat.
yeah.
Richard Curtis is no doubt writing a first draft of the script as we speak. Yeah, there was serious chemistry there, I agree. Now, all week, I've been asking you to send in your condolences, fond memories and experiences of the Queen and your thoughts on our new king. So let's share some of them now. Tinks says, the Queen was vilified for her absence and silence when Diana died, but it was because she was supporting two little boys who'd lost their mum. She suspended royal duty to be a human. There will never be another woman like her on the throne in my lifetime. From Lawrence on the email, I met the Queen in Cardiff on the 26th of July 1985 when I was 12 with my younger brother who was 4. As I walked out to greet her, my brother let go of my hand and ran back to my dad's office. The Queen asked me who had run away and why. I replied it was my brother and you scared him. She laughed at the joke and we chatted. I will never forget it. Oh my goodness, that's such a great story. And Lawrence was also lucky enough to meet King Charles 27 years ago. He continued, he opened a new wetsuit factory in Bodmin, Cornwall. I was about 22, and as an excuse to be at the factory because I didn't work there, I was still at uni with my dad, and he asked me to deliver a new company car to one of the employees. When Charles asked me what I did, I told him I'd just delivered a car down before. He laughed and said, cheap labour. Yeah, he does have a good sense of humour. Keep your thoughts and feelings coming in on this sad occasion ahead of the Queen's State funeral. Tomorrow we'll be back here at Buckingham Palace tomorrow night from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. live. Dan at gbnews.uk and on our GB News Twitter account too. Now, from letting Harry wear his military uniform to being invited for a walkabout with William and Kate, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have been handed a raft of concessions by the royals in recent days. In fact, King Charles and Prince William have been admirable in their statesman-like conduct despite the pained relationship they share with Harry and Meghan. Even in today's newspapers, pals of the Sussexes branded the decision not to invite the opt-out royals to a glitzy dinner with visiting world leaders as, quote, bonkers. But as I wrote in my latest Mail Online column, the opportunity for peace has been offered by Charles and William to the Sussexes, even though they have been subjected to a string of highly damaging, ad hominem and factually inaccurate attacks, of which it is impossible for them to respond. Now it's up to Harry and Meghan to show for once that they can put the Queen's wishes for a strong and united family in the wake of her death ahead of their own futile and ultimately damaging quest for revenge. And I'm joined now by star US royal commentator Kinsey Schofield, who is normally based at the very centre of Harry and Meghan's new life in California, but has joined us here live at Buckingham Palace ahead of the Queen's state funeral. So, Kinsey, look, I think there have been huge concessions made by Charles and William this week. Surely, even as American, Kinsey, even as a Californian, even as someone who lives very close to Montecito, even you, Kinsey, have to now concede. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have to stop slagging off their royal family, stop their campaign of revenge, and they have to turn a page on this negativity.
I completely agree. The world is watching. The world is watching their behavior. And I think that so far they have behaved appropriately. However, Dan, we know that the Queen invited Harry and Meghan to Balmoral days before her death. Yes. And they rejected the offer. And I'm sorry, that's going to remain in our memories. That's going to stay heavy on our hearts. And I don't know if you remember Harry talking about being haunted by his last phone call with his mother, where he was urgent to get off the phone with her. I mean, these are those moments that change Harry, that really traumatize him. So I think that this is going to be really stuck with him. But no, you're right. We know Variety, she was about to get the cover of Variety magazine. They've decided to put it on hold to allow Meghan and the family to grieve.
But not cancel it.
But not cancel it. And
what about the book?
The book, we know that it's postponed, but I wish it would be yanked. And don't forget that Meghan's got book deals too. We just haven't heard as much about her book deals, but she has those book deals ready to go as well. So I think that they need to yank everything. I think they had an incredible opportunity to be spokespeople for this family. They are a beautiful couple, and we loved them. We loved them. Yep. We loved them.
I loved them.
I know, we loved them.
And that's something that people always forget.
Yeah.
They think that folk like me were critics of Harry and Meghan from day one.
Nope.
Absolutely not. That's rubbish.
And our opinion changed based on behavior.
Yes.
Nothing else.
Yes.
We weren't worried about what they looked like. It was all behavior. And so, I think that they do really need to, I bet there are strategies happening behind the scenes right now. Where do we go moving forward? Do we want to have our foot in the door here because obviously it's open? Or do we want to continue to burn the place down, which is what they've been doing. They've been very destructive over the last 2 years with friends like Oprah and Tyler Perry. All they're doing is bringing down the platform that was given to them by the royal family.
Now, Kinsey, you say they've behaved admirably this week, and look, I would agree with you in terms of what they've done in public. Unfortunately...
Behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, there's been 2 leaks now.
Right.
And I think there have been 2 damaging leaks. So the first is this leak to the New York Post, which is saying, oh, how terrible that we were uninvited from the big state reception tonight. I'm sorry, the state reception is only for working royals, so that's the first piece of bad behaviour. Second piece of bad behaviour came today with a leak to Roy and Nicker, the regarded royal correspondent for the Sunday Times newspaper, from a friend, we're told, a friend of Harry, I wonder who that was, saying he was so disappointed when he received his military uniform yesterday, even though he wasn't actually meant to be wearing military uniform in the first place, because apparently removed from the uniform were the initials, the Queen's or the late Queen's initials.
Wait,
and he almost didn't even want to wear the uniform as a result.
But we need to go back and look at his uniform on his wedding day. I believe that the uniform he wore on his wedding day also did not have those initials. So that's something we need to take a look at.
Well, we do, because that's fascinating, Kinsey, because actually what this shows to me is that Harry wants to be a victim. It doesn't matter how many concessions Charles makes. Because remember, Charles didn't have to allow Harry to wear the military uniform in the first place.
Right.
He allows him to wear it, and Harry's still not helpful. So he's like one of those teenagers, isn't he, who it doesn't matter how many times the parent bends over backwards and gives them whatever they want. Actually, they're like sulky little brats and they're never satisfied.
And I think that we've established those two, Harry and Meghan, they work off of each other.
Yeah.
It is like gasoline on an open flame.
It's unhealthy.
It's very unhealthy.
Because what she should be saying to him, right, at this moment is, don't worry about the initials. No one even knew about the initials. No one had even noticed.
Nobody noticed
What everyone is noticing is the fact that Charles has given you this great concession, and you should be happy about that.
And that you are allowed to stand there and honor your grandmother, who you've been, very cruel towards over the last few years. I'm sorry that they feel like they had a horrible time while they were in the fold. But when you attack the royal family, you are attacking the Queen. She was the mascot is a terrible word, but she really was the brand. And I don't care who did what to you. When you attack the royal family, you attack the Queen. And it was funny how they would take snipes, but then they'd have Oprah on the morning shows the next morning go, oh, it's not Prince Philip, but not the Queen. You're ultimately hurting the Queen in all of your behavior. And I think that it's been very destructive over the last few years. I'm grateful to see him honoring her over the last few days, but it's a privilege that he's been allowed to do so, because other people, if he were like his wife, he would have burned that bridge, because that is what him and his wife do. They burn bridges and they move on.
No, I think that's a very fair point, actually. And look, I understand he is grieving the Queen. Of course I do. But as you say, I don't think we can just forget all of the bad behaviour. And what we need to see now, and when I say we, I'm talking about the British public, I'm talking about the people that support the monarchy, and I'm talking about the royal family itself. What we need to see is some sort of indication from Harry that he isn't going to go back and go immediately back to business as usual.
And how does that happen? I think that happens by us finding out that the book is no longer going to be available. I think that that's really ultimately what's going to make everybody...
But that's not going to happen, is it? He's going to release the book. He's going to delay the release of the book. And actually, Kinsey, do you know what's probably most sickening about this? He will use the Queen's death to update the book and include information about what's happened this week. And that's always been Prince William's biggest nightmare. He's so concerned that Harry will use private moments, or that Meghan will use private moments. And these are not just normally private moments between a family, Kinsey. They are historically private moments.
Correct.
And you know that the royal family don't want anyone to know what happens in these moments behind closed doors. They view it as sacrosanct.
And it cheapens the entire thing when we hear about it. It makes it, what we should be talking about again is, the Queen's legacy. I was thinking about, the war ending and her sneaking out and being a teenager amongst the public.
Yes.
Those are the stories that we should be remembering. And unfortunately, we're getting leaks from the New York Post all the way over in New York, and that I think is pretty disrespectful.
No, it is. It absolutely is. Well, Kinsey Schofield, thank you so much for being with me here live at Buckingham Palace. Of course, we are awaiting a historic 24 hours. What are you expecting, Kinsey? Real emotion?
I'm going to cry. I'm expecting to cry. I hope I'm going to hug you when this is all said and done with, because it's been an emotional week.
It has. It's been an emotional roller coaster. I want to say a huge thank you to Kinsey, to all of my guests here at Buckingham Palace, but especially for you, for joining me throughout what has been an incredible 10 days for the country. I think there's been so much positive to take from the way that we have unified, and tomorrow is going to be one day that we will never forget. So I'm going to be back here again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. to reflect on the state funeral of Elizabeth the Great and the legacy that she leaves behind. Thank you so much.
Queen Elizabeth II was our longest-serving monarch, a lifetime defined by service. As a young woman during the war, she made a vow to serve her people for as long